Hi, my name is Frank. I'm an alcoholic. My story is relatively boring from the beginning. I grew up in East Boston with a family that's very supportive and loving. My childhood was pretty uneventful. I didn't have everything that I wanted, but I had everything I needed. And I didn't drink when I was young. I graduated high school and went to college. I didn't have a lot of time to drink while I was in college, outside of maybe like an occasional card game or things along those lines. I was pretty much working from 4 to midnight and midnight to 8 and going to school during the day for the 4 years that I was in school. When I got out of college, that's in essence when reality kicked in, and I started to embark on my career in law enforcement. I was single for the first 3 or 4 years that I was on the job, and got married, and my wife and I had a wonderful life from the beginning. And I didn't drink outside, maybe a party here and there, and but I was pretty much dealing with life as life came along. But it wasn't long after we had been married, then I started to rely on alcohol for dealing with problems or not dealing with the problems. Probably one of the first events that really got me relying on alcohol as a way of dealing or not dealing with my problems was when I had been shot at, and my partner and I had been pinned down by a sniper for not a long time, but the next day I went over to my mom and dad's house to have a cup of coffee, and my mom was cooking, and my dad and I were sitting at the table, and I picked up the coffee cup and my hand started shaking uncontrollably, and my father asked me what was going on. Excuse me. And I told him that my partner and I had been pinned down by a sniper, and my father was in World War II and had received the Bronze Star, so he knew a little bit about combat. And he grabbed a couple of beers and we went down to the backyard, and my father was not a drinker at all, and he said, tell me what happened. And I told him, and it was a good experience. But the problem was that later on in life, my wife and I had begun to deal with some serious issues, or been thrust into some serious situation. The first being the stillborn child that we had back in 1993. And I remember helping my wife go through the situation and making sure that everything was okay. And when everything was done, I remembered how the alcohol had helped me numb the pain, so I took a couple of drinks, and that was pretty much it. But life began to throw us a couple more monkey wrenches, and I remember the alcohol having that numbing effect, and I started to drink a little bit more regularly. And I went on probably for the next 15 years or so, not affected that much by alcohol, but it was later on when I began to rely on alcohol more and more. I had used alcohol to help me fall asleep, and when I'd fall asleep, I wasn't a restful sleep, and in the morning I'd wake up and my wife would tell me stories about me screaming out in the middle of the night or hitting myself in my sleep, and I just kind of didn't see any connection with the alcohol. And then my drinking began more regular, and I started to drink as soon as I got home from work in the evening. And I didn't look at the dreams that I had the same way. I started to drink in the morning, and at one point I had decided that I wasn't in control of my drinking anymore, and I made a phone call to my boss, and he set me up with the stress unit at my department, and I was checked into a rehab facility. And I had been there for only about 3 or 4 hours, and I was in my room with my roommate, and I laid down on the bed because it was a couple of hours before the class began, and the next thing I remember, I woke up in ICU. The staff told me that I had a grand mal seizure, and I was spent 5 days in the hospital at that time, and when I got out of the hospital I went into the treatment center. And I got out of the treatment center, and I went to meetings, but I wasn't really convinced that I had a drinking problem, even though I had, that seizure and woken up in 4-point restraints and all. So I went to meetings, but my heart wasn't in it. And after a while, I slowed down, and I eventually stopped going to meetings altogether. And I had been sober for about 7 months when I had a call for somebody who was going to commit suicide by jumping off a building. And I was talking with him as he was on the ledge, and he told me that he was despondent because his son had died. And I happened to have my prayer card in my pocket, and I showed it to him, and I made a connection with him based on the death of my children. And it was a little bit of an event in trying to get him from killing himself. And eventually he came down off the ledge, and I was in my cruiser watching him as EMTs and firefighters and paramedics were treating him. And that's when I had that post-traumatic experience again, where my hands started to shake. And I stopped on the way home and picked up a bottle of whiskey. I went on like that for several months, and it started to have a negative impact on my job. And eventually I was told that I was drinking again, and there was no two ways about it. I couldn't argue with them, and I needed to turn over my weapon and go to rehab again. And that went on for about 2 or 3 more years. And over that course of time, I had gone into 3 or 4 different rehab facilities. A couple of them the same. One I went to several times. And the last time, a year and a half ago, was the marathon bombing. And I was going to meetings on a regular basis, and every day, in fact. And for that week that we were looking for the bomber or the bombers, I didn't have time to go to meetings. We were basically working 18-hour days, and when you went home, it was only really to just change your clothes and get something to eat and wash up, and then you were back at work again. And I went on like that until it was evident that I was drinking again, and I was taken off the street. And I remember I was drinking, and I was due to go to rehab the next day. My wife had come into the room and told me that when I got back from rehab, I was going to have to find a new place to live because she couldn't deal with this anymore. And I was absolutely numb over that, so I just said okay, and went to rehab the next day. And it wasn't until I was probably sober about a week or so, I'd spent 28 days at that facility, and I realized what I had done. You know, it was one thing to lose my hopes and dreams of my, you know, any aspirations that I had in writing or a career, but now I had basically thrown my marriage away, and that really scared the crap out of me. So I had a phone call with my wife because when I got out of rehab, the therapist wanted to know what my aftercare plan was going to be, and she told me that I sounded good and that she wanted me to come home to her. I couldn't believe that she had given me another chance, so I knew that this was the last opportunity that I had. So when I got out of rehab, I went into the AA program, the fellowship, full force. They had told me that it would be a good idea to do 90 meetings in 90 days, and I ended up doing 120 meetings in 90 days, all the while working 40 hours a week and, you know, doing overtime in court and details and things like that. And I remember telling my wife when I got home from rehab that it was going to be different, but she wasn't going to be seeing a lot of me, and she completely understood, and she said, "You need to do this." So I completely understand, and I'll never forget that. So I did, and I felt different this time because I had that gift of desperation. And even though I had thought I felt that before, I really didn't. And the stark reality of being told that, you know, you're no longer going to be with the woman who had decided to share the rest of her life with you, that, you know, I better step up to the plate and, you know, take care of this. So I went to the meetings, and I listened, and I absorbed, and I talked to other people and other alcoholics, and listened to what they were doing, and what they were doing that was right, and what they were doing that was wrong, and I got a wonderful glow going to meetings. and being with these people, you know, who were, whether they were bikers or bankers or beatniks or, you know, straight-laced types, everyone was there for the same purpose. And it was wonderful, and is wonderful. So I went to these meetings, and I noticed a change, but more importantly, the people around me began to notice a change. And I started to put on weight, whereas before I was wasting away to nothing. I began to lose those pains and those aches that I felt in my abdomen. I began to stay focused and clear, and now people were including me in the conversation and asking me questions and seeking out my opinion on things. And I got a job in the program. At first it was making coffee, but then I became the secretary for a meeting, and then I, you know, informally became the secretary for a couple of other meetings because the secretaries were sick or they had to be out of town for a period of time. And it felt good knowing that people relied on me. Going to meetings was one thing, but when the meeting was over and there would be a line of people waiting to talk to me, to ask me questions, to seek guidance, direction, my opinion. It was a wonderful feeling. It is a wonderful feeling still. I go to these meetings and people ask me questions and they listen to me. And it makes me maintain my sobriety for even just for 24 hours. So it's been a year and a half now, and I can't explain it, and I don't want to explain it. I don't want to understand it because I have a tendency to overanalyze things, as most alcoholics do. So I'm just willing to accept what it is that the program has offered me and given me. And whenever I can, I give it back to someone who comes into a meeting who looks like they're hurting. And they invariably will tell me that, you know, they want what I have. And it's like, look, you know, I'm just doing what I was told to do. There's nothing special. There's nothing different. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's a very simple fellowship. You go to meetings, you ask for help, and you don't drink. It's really so simple. And as alcoholics, we have a tendency to complicate things. So you just take it for what it's worth. I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow. I do know that if I keep going to meetings, I'm going to be okay. And it's nice. It's nice. Thank you.